So welcome everybody to Women at NJPAC's Healing Through the Arts series and today's virtual event, Healing and Resisting with Music. We are so glad you're here and you're in for a wonderful afternoon conversation with acclaimed pianist and composer, Dr. Courtney Bryan, and moderated by our very own trustee, Antoinette Alice Williams. We women have always had a seat at the table at NJPAC. Ever since we were founded, our 9 founders demanded that 25 years ago. Today we are a dynamic community of women who represent the diversity and passion of our state and who are committed to celebrating the healing and transformational role women play in our communities. I welcome you on behalf of our Board of Trustees, all of our members, and our partners who collaborated with us on this event. This is the 4th in our series of Healing Through the Arts workshops that we launched in response to the isolation and social distancing, which we have experienced during this pandemic. And I really do want to thank our trustee, Dr. Antoinette Alice Williams, for her vision in creating this series. So just to remind you about our timing for this afternoon, this is a 1-hour session and a half an hour or so of moderated conversation with Courtney and Antoinette, followed by about 15 minutes of questions from you. So we like the community feeling of being in a Zoom meeting. So we hope you'll just keep your audio off while we're having the conversation. You can keep your video on or off, however you'd like. And then you can feel free to use the chat function to ask your questions and also to make any comments. You can also raise your hand in the participants function by putting your cursor over that at the bottom of the screen. So one of the things that we love is that we have so many wonderful partners to help us with this. Our founding partner was the Zonta Club of Essex County, and I'm delighted to welcome 2 new partners to our group this session, Pamela Morgan from Women in Media Newark and Lauren Decker from the COCO. So I'm going to invite Pamela to just offer us a welcome, and she'll be followed by Lauren. Pamela?
Hi, thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone, and welcome to what is sure to be an inspirational program with Courtney Bryan. I am delighted to represent Women in Media Newark, an organization that advocates for and educates the public about global issues facing women using film and the arts as our platform. As we face 3 deadly pandemics, the first being COVID-19 and all of the health and financial implications associated with it, the second being the ever-increasing pandemic of violence against women, and the third being the pandemic of racial injustice, we have reached a point of heightened emotional duress. I think it's fair to say that some of us are in emotional crisis. We are indeed fortunate that the leadership of Women at NJPAC understands and in acknowledgement of our need for spiritual and emotional healing, as well as our need for resilience to continue the struggle, that they have decided to bring forth this exceptional series to provide healing energies, light, and inspiration to our community through the arts. We are particularly pleased to be included with the Zonta Club of Essex County and the COCO, and presenting Dr. Courtney Bryan, a pianist who I have admired for many years. Her recent tribute to the late Jerry Allen was one of the most spiritually stirring I have heard for quite some time, and it has secured her place as Jerry's successor for me, as well as for others, I'm sure. I would like to express my gratitude to Women at NJPAC, Marsha Wilson Brown, Board President, Dr. Antoinette Ellis Williams, and Sarah Rosen for the opportunity to co-sponsor today's program. Thank you all for joining us, and I pray for healing, strength, and renewed determination for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Lauren?
Yes, thank you, Pam, and thank you, Sarah, for this opportunity to be a part of this beautiful event today. I'm Lauren Decker, and I'm a co-founder and CMO of the COCO. And for those of you who are not familiar with the COCO, we are a women's-focused co-working and co-learning community, physically located in downtown Summit, New Jersey. But since March, we have welcomed members from all over the country and the world as we moved our programming to virtual. So thank you to many of you here on the call for joining us for those programs and being a part of our community. It's our mission to support women wherever they are on the journey of life and career. And we've had the good fortune to partner with NJPAC on several events, given the shared spirit of our mission and that of women at NJPAC. We're especially excited about the theme for today's workshop as part of our monthly focus on wellness. And I'm honored to be in the company of such great talent here today. In closing, I just wanted to invite everyone here on this call to a virtual event that we're hosting on Wednesday evening with a handful of really noteworthy education leaders from Newark and other places across the state on the topic of the digital divide in education. You can register for that workshop at thecoco.com/calendar. So with that, thank you again, Sarah, for the opportunity to be a part of this and for the community that you're building each day.
Thank you, Lauren. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for the afternoon, Dr. Antoinette Ellis-Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a joy to be back. Fall is here. It's ushering us into this new spirit of color and change. And I think it's a humbling moment. And it's a perfect time to invite and to have my friend, my sister in sacred things and activist things, Dr. Courtney Bryan, native of New Orleans. She's a pianist, composer. Her interests are broad. She has influence from jazz to experimental, gospel, spiritual, and hymns. And it says here in her bio, focusing on bridging the sacred and the secular. Bryan's compositions explore human emotions through sound, confronting and challenge of noting the feeling of improvisation. She has degrees from Oberlin, Rutgers, and not too long ago, Dr. Bryan received her DMA from Columbia University and just completed a postdoc at Princeton University. Your homework assignment is to download her bio, review it, and write an essay on it. There will be a test at some point later down the road. She has performed with Wynton Marsalis. She has performed extensively around the world, from the Met, Lincoln Center, to Carnegie Hall. And we are really, really happy to have her. Courtney, in addition to her musical work, is very much moved by things happening in the world. And so as a form of invocation and a form of welcome, we will hear 2 original pieces from Courtney today. The first you will hear after I pause, and then Courtney will come on and we will have a conversation that pivots to her work, Sanctum. So right now, I offer to you Dr. Courtney Bryan, Spirit.
Let there be peace and love and perfection throughout all creation. Oh God, let there be peace and love and perfection throughout all creation. Oh God, let there be peace and love and perfection throughout all creation. Oh God.
Amen. My. If you didn't feel it, I need to check your pulse. Dr. Courtney, amazing. And as I listen to this work, it's a prayer. Your ability to mix spoken word with sacred music. We heard the conflict, the tension as you you demonstrated that so beautifully, and yet there was still resolution in the work. And so thank you. Spirit, where did it come from? Was it a commissioned work? Tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you so much. By the way, I'm really excited to be in conversation with you always, like we've been over the years.
That's right.
always learn so much. This piece, actually, Spirit and Sanctum are related in that they were the same year. In 2015, I was working on two main projects. One was Sanctum, which was commissioned for American Composers Orchestra. And then this piece was part of a very different kind of performance I was doing called Prophetica, an oratorio. So that was a collaboration with director Charlotte Brathwaite and artist Abigail DeVille. And we were doing a piece that was loosely inspired by many different things, but mainly inspired by Alice Coltrane's Sun Ra and Harriet Tubman. So this was a piece that I had just kind of opening up that larger piece. And there were a lot of different things that went with that piece musically, but this piece, it opened up that piece, but later I started using it in the tradition of how Billie Holiday would sing Strange Fruit to end her programs and her concerts as a way of speaking out about the racial injustice of her time period. And so I use it the same way. And the quote that I say in the beginning, I first heard on a recording by Alice Coltrane, where she was quoting, she had a recording of John Coltrane's voice after he had passed away. And so she starts her piece, The Sun, with a quote of John Coltrane saying that, "May there be peace and love and perfection throughout all creation, oh God." Right. So I do that sort of as an invocation each time, beginning, and I play through the piece, and then at the end, I always read the names of different victims of police brutality. And unfortunately, every time I've performed it, there are different names to add. So I just kind of mix it between adults and children and different names that come to mind, and just want to read their names out loud.
And I think that's important. I think it's always important to invoke their presence in their name. Nina Simone says that the artist's duty is to reflect the times. And in listening to you do this, and Mississippi Goddamn comes to mind, and we're going to hear more from you in a moment. Could you speak a little bit about how you view your role vis-a-vis all of these things, or, yeah.
Sure, I'm glad you mentioned Nina Simone, because she's such an important influence on me, and so deeply that I sometimes don't even mention. Like, I think about people I've learned about along the way sometimes, and different pieces I've been inspired, but Nina Simone overall has just been an influence since I first heard her as a child. But yeah, that statement is interesting, because yeah, people have the different reasons why they do art, or what doing art does for them, and what they want it to do for others. But for me, music has always been my main form of communication with others, and also my way of expressing myself, like making sense of the world. So I lean on music to make sense of the world, and a lot of the projects that I've done in recent years, mainly centered on police brutality. It's not, that's the main issue that really has been affecting me over the years. And I've used music to really deal with the emotions of the things that we see across our screen, or that we hear from people we love about experiences, or that maybe that people have experienced themselves. But for me, it's really like being able to feel the emotions of this regular trauma, you know, that we deal with. But and then I feel like in feeling what it is, which is what I feel like music can do, then it helps us to know what kind of actions to do. It's like just being aware. And
yeah, and you mentioned that you've done collaborations, you've done individual work. And so as you were talking about Spirit and Sanctum sort of as twins. Are you writing for orchestras? Are you writing for ensembles? Are you writing for librettos? How are you dealing with the technical part of it?
Yeah, so that's the interesting part, is like having similar inspirations in all of my work, and varied too. But I mean, there's certain things that are always there. It's always spirituality as a central inspiration, and it's also like the kind of spirituality that I feel like we had at Bethany Baptist Church, where where we met, where it's about the afterlife, but it's also about the here and now.
That's right.
What can we do? So that kind of spirituality, everything I do is that, but sometimes I'm collaborating with others. Sometimes the audience is more like an audience that's used to going to theater or performance art, and sometimes it's full orchestra, and so it's an audience that's used to going to orchestra to hear Beethoven and maybe occasionally a living composer, and then sometimes it's me on the piano.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that audience. So the audience always changes, but the inspiration in the music is usually related to that, like related to the spirit and being a spirit in a body in this world and having to deal with with what's going on with us in this world.
So could you walk us through your process with Sanctum? I'd love to hear it, and thank you. Go ahead.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, I'm happy to share this piece, Sanctum. This piece means a lot to me in a number of ways. It's my first official commission. So even career-wise, it just, I'd been writing pieces since I've been playing music. I've been writing music. And I had a lot of opportunities to write for different ensembles here and there, but this was the first time that I was commissioned by an organization, and it was American Composers Orchestra. And it was for orchestra, so that was exciting. And I remember them mentioning that the commission was for a full orchestra, and if I wanted to use electronics in any sort of way, that was a possibility. So that's what I did. And this flyer that you see right here was a recent performance of Sanctum. So the premiere of Sanctum was in 2015 with American Composers Orchestra that I mentioned. That's a picture from the premiere. It took place at Jazz at Lincoln Center in New York. Here's the behind. The Sanctum started, I wrote it while I was doing a postdoc at Princeton, and I was in the African American Studies department. And I was going to a lot of talks and also just talking individually with a lot of the people who were that department, between Imani Perry and Eddie Glaude and Keonghai Mata Taylor and Jordan Camp, who was the postdoc at the same time. So all these folks who I was around and getting to have conversations with and go to talks, it really inspired me to write a piece. Like, it started off as the commission from American Composers Orchestra was, it was on the same program with Wynton Marsalis with his Blues Symphony. So there was already this theme of jazz and the orchestra, or improvisation in the orchestra. And I had just done a workshop. That's how I got involved with American Composers Orchestra. My advisor, George Lewis, was in collaboration with American Composers Orchestra to do a workshop called the Jazz Composers Orchestra Institute. So we did all these workshops about writing for orchestra, but also about thinking about improvisation in the orchestra. So I was thinking, okay, what about improvisation from holiness preaching traditions? And I decided to draw primarily from Pastor Shirley Caesar's sermon, The Praying Slave Lady. And I keep meaning to correct the title for Reverend C.L. Franklin's sermon, The Eagle Stirs Her Nest. So it's her. But those are some of what I listened to. And part of Pastor Caesar's sermon was, beneath the whole thing was Reverend Charles Albert Tindley's hymn, Stand By Me. So I quote that in the piece. And as I was writing this piece inspired by these sermons, there was all of what was going on around us with police brutality. And there was one particular incident that really affected me. And that was of Marlene Pennock from California. She was filmed, a bystander filmed her being beaten by a cop on the interstate in Los Angeles in broad daylight. and she lived to talk about it. So there were interviews she did on the news, and so there's parts of her talking on the news that I saved recordings of, and I end up using in the piece. And then also during this whole time, once I decided, so I mentioned I'm here around people talking about police brutality. I've always had social justice issues in my mind while writing and thinking about spiritual ways of thinking about things. But it's the first time I had a piece where I said this piece is a response to this issue.
So this was a very directed piece of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear some things or walk us through
Sure.
something else.
Yeah, so I just want to quickly mention that it had I would play at the end of this, the recent performance, which was a chamber premiere of Sanctum with London Sinfonietta. So it was a concert, a Black Lives Matter concert in London. So I'll say more about that. In fact, here it is. So I'll get to some of the music, but this was a recent concert. It was curated by George Lewis and Elaine Mishner, and all the composers, all Black composers from different parts of the world. And there was this program. Yeah, so this happened on October 28th, and actually on November 25th, it'll be available for people to watch the filmed performance that they did. So that's coming up. But yeah, so here's some of the pictures of who I mentioned. So Shirley Caesar, Reverend C.L. Franklin, and other influences, just to mention that this piece was a piece that had a lot of musical footnotes in it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's footnotes where I actually quote Max Roach, We Insist Freedom Now Suite. There's a certain drum rhythm that comes in that I take a little piece of his drum rhythm and then I riff off of that in the composition and build upon that. And John Coltrane is a part of everything I do. So there's a quote from Alabama at the very end from Elvin Jones from Alabama about the girls that were bombed in Alabama. And A Love Supreme, the theme of A Love Supreme is sort of here and there in the piece for those who hear it. So here's Marlene Pennock, who I mentioned, the woman who was a victim of police brutality and was able to speak about her experience. And also Leslie McFadden, the mother of Mike Brown. So as I was writing this piece, Mike Brown was killed. I was already working on the piece, and I just started paying attention to what was going on in Ferguson, Missouri, with the protests or the responses to this injustice. And there's voices around Leslie McFadden when she finds out about the acquittal of the cop who killed her son, and they're saying, "We're with you, we love you." And so those are some voices that made it into the piece. We're with you, we love you, because it was for her, but also for the many mothers who have lost their children or people who have lost their loved ones to.
And that's important. That's important.
Yeah. So another Bethany connection, Bill Lee. Once I worked on this piece, I did the electronics. I collected these recordings, the sermons, the protests, the interviews, and I made arrangements in a program called Logic Pro, and I had that as it kind of that came first or alongside the music ideas. So I had these themes, and I'll show those themes, but it was really listening to these recordings. There's so many recordings I listened to over and over again that didn't make it into the piece, but they're part of the process. But I had the parts that were completely part of the piece, so I edited those into files. And then when it came time for the performance, I met with Bill Lee, who's an expert, sound engineer, and met with him and collaborated with him on how to actually make the sounds come out, in the speakers the way I was thinking. And he helped me edit some things to really get the effect of what I really wanted. So I wanted to mention that part of the collaboration was important as well. And so I'll just play, I think I'll skip this. I'll play a little bit. Here's Stand By Me, the hymn that I reharmonized. So I'll play a little bit. So basically this hymn is quoted in the middle of this piece, of my piece, and I quote it, but I really extend it out, and it's in the strings, then it grows out to be the full orchestra. So that's one moment of quoting, but some of it's less directly quoting. I have these things that are inspired by, I call them gospel runs, but basically like some of the singing in Shirley Caesar's piece, and like just thinking about the kind of vocal tradition in that. So I have some lines that are inspired by that, and even more abstractly, I had the tradition of the whooping sound, which maybe you can explain more, but from Reverend C.L. Franklin, that was a very important part of his preaching technique, was to have that whooping technique, and it really builds like the emotions in a certain way and tells a story. And so that one wasn't like imitating the sound of what his voice does. It was more abstract, just kind of like how does that influence music. So here's like a mix of those things that I have. Strings where the hymn builds up, it's still the hymn going, but it keeps growing. So there's like these runs happening, there's the whooping sounds, there's the recording.
I think that was a beautiful, beautiful conversation there that is familiar to many of us. And the fact that you're overlaying this other voice with, you know, the Black church, and to have that central, I think is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, church has been such a big part of my life, and I've been part of a lot of churches, but definitely my time, like even I was thinking as you played the Spirits video, the fact that when I was at Bethany Baptist Church, and that's when Reverend Dr. M. William Howard was the pastor, I remember he would have me play before his sermon, and where you were minister, of course, so I know you not only as Dr. Ellis Williams, but Minister Ellis Williams. But yeah, when sometimes when he'd have me play before the sermon, and Lillian Whitaker would let me know that the minister of music, she would have me go from the organ to the piano, and I'd play something. And one thing that meant a lot to me in that setting is that anything I played was valued, and it's wherever I was that day. So whether I played something really peaceful and serene, or whether I was hitting the piano or playing inside the piano or whatever it was, like the fact that that was welcomed into a church setting was a major thing for me. So it also kind of went the other way. It's like, okay, well, here's the things like that we're doing in church, and then how does that fit into my orchestral composition? So I won't play these examples, but I had some themes. So I mentioned the recordings had their own inspiration, but I also went to the piano and had certain themes, and I'll play you what those themes sound like. But there were two main themes that come throughout the piece, and here's one of them. This is the first theme. So that was one theme, and another theme that I relate directly to Marlene Pennock is this theme B. So there's a whole section with that. And then other things that so I've been a collector with this piece. Another thing where the chants that I heard either directly or that I heard on YouTube. And so I collected the rhythm of these different protest chants. And then they end up in the piece, both in the recordings and the members of the orchestra. So that was kind of interesting too, to write a piece that had these very like clear protest, and then to tell, to write it in so that the oboist and the flautist and everybody, they're playing these things, and but it serves the music, but it's also like they're through their instrument saying the same thing. So I collected that, and here's an example of the oboes saying "No justice, no peace," and the clarinet saying "Hey, hey, ho, ho, those racist cops have got to go." And so the different instruments are chanting basically, and it's all overlaid. So I'll just speak through that. There's other themes I mentioned. There's "A Love Supreme" is in there, and this Max Roach rhythm is da 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 da. He starts off one of the parts of the suite in the live performance of "We Assist Freedom Now" suite with that rhythm, and so I thought that was very important symbolically for me. So there's a part that starts like the protest part of the piece that starts off with Max Roach.
Well, I mean, a piano is a percussion instrument, right? And
that's true.
And a lot of times people don't think about it. There's some questions regarding influence of Cecil Taylor, Sun Ra. Maybe people are seeing some things here and are interested in how you draw from those places.
Okay.
If at all.
Yeah, no, I do. I'm trying to think in this piece in particular, but definitely in general. I mean, Sun Ra, that piece I was working on alongside this one, the one Prophetica, there was a lot of influence of Sun Ra. And I would say, even though I'd seen things about Sun Ra, that was my beginning to really checking him out, his ideas and his music. And I'm at another stage now where I'm really trying to get more into learning about Sun Ra. So I have like Sun Ra always is there as this like this major presence, and I even have him as a screen saver on Zoom that I use sometimes. But there's so much to him, so musically and his idea-wise, that there's definitely influence, but it's one that I'm getting into now. I would say Alice Coltrane is a major influence. John Coltrane as well. Cecil Taylor definitely, as far as listening and just like the overall concept, of his music. Just like Sun Ra is another one that I would want to spend more time, really studying more seriously. And I want to skip to, there's a whole theme of breathing throughout, which actually, I wrote this before Eric Garner was killed. But by the time we had the performance, Eric Garner had been killed, and then the whole focus on breathing took on a different significance. So that was kind of interesting for me personally, just listening to my piece. And I want to play an excerpt. So this is an excerpt from the most recent performance, the chamber performance with London Sinfonietta of Sanctum, the chamber version. So what I want to play is the ending, like coming out of that hymn quotation that I put, that I kind of showed parts of, and then going into the protests.
Okay, let's listen.
That's a good place.
Amazing. Amazing. Several things come to mind. I think about Gwendolyn Poe's book, Bringing Rec and Women in Hip Hop. And the premise is that the public sphere wasn't created for marginalized voices, but when these voices are in the public sphere, they bring rec. And I think also about, as a mixed media collagist, artist myself, the brilliant way that you take the work of others in these little ways, and you take the instrument and you have this call and response in a way. And it's amazing. It's amazing. I say that because here we are in this time of unrest. And, my husband says, the 60s were guided by music. There was a soundtrack of that civil rights generation. How do we do resistance work without music? Or where do you see us now with music and the interpretation of it, or even sound to inspire activists and to do work on the ground?
That's a good question. I want to know more about that. And by the way, I'm glad you mentioned Junius Williamson. I was thinking about Return to the Source and like how it's been really an influence to see, the performances of that music from that time. And right now, I don't know. I guess I know I'm sure music and sound is the important part, but I guess the thing that stands out the most to me is just like video. Mm-hmm. Like video, including the sound and the images, and that's how a movement like what happened in 2015 in Ferguson could grow into what happened in 2020 with the uprising this year, and just all of the knowledge that I feel like the knowledge that has been gained by such a wider group of people based on the scholarship or the teachings that's been going on about like the history of racial violence and also with policing, but also the videos that people have crossed people whether they want them to or not. And you're people have been more faced with the reality. I mean, there are those in our society, there's those of us who have always known that this is the reality, like the issue of police brutality and just the terror that that Black people feel just existing, in the society. But I mean, we've experienced joy as well. But I'm just saying, like, with this issue, with policing and racial violence and state violence. But I think what happens through video and the sound image and everything is that a wider group of people have not been able to turn away and have had to face what's happening, and then have found themselves, speaking out in ways that maybe they wouldn't have some years ago.
So here you are, invited to London to have voice. This is the public sphere, right? And we invite this Black woman from New Orleans in, and she's now a voice for herself, but a voice for a generation in a different way, and bringing rec in the sense that I'm not going to play the way that others may expect me in a classical setting. And so you're crossing these boundaries really, really in amazing ways. And now the global conversation vis-a-vis police brutality and what it means for Black and brown bodies, and how we have this multiracial group of coalition. And so when I see you in these places and the invitations, what is it suggesting about where you are as an artist, or where we are as a culture, with what has been defined as traditional, what has been defined as, acceptable?
Well, I'll go back to 2015 with the premiere of this piece. There were certain risks that I took that I wasn't sure how it was going to go. Because the commission was basically to write for this body of instruments for this concert. I knew that there was loosely a theme about jazz and orchestra, improvisation in the orchestra, but there was no requirement to include that. It was basically, here's the instruments, here's the duration of the piece, and here's the commission, details and the date and the concert. And so the piece revealed itself to me what it needed to be for me personally. Like it was a response to police brutality. And there was a moment I decided that I think really addresses, like, I love the quote. I'm going to have to ask you more about it later, but about the rec.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. there's a part in the piece where the recordings say "hands up, don't shoot." And I made a decision that the orchestra, it doesn't go completely silent, but it only has like percussion. So basically, like there's a lot of sounds. There's all these instruments on stage. There's like a lot of different things happening at one time, textures, different ideas overlaying. And in that moment, the speakers, there's a left and a right speaker in the hall. So sitting in jazz at Lincoln Center, all of a sudden, most of the instruments drop out. You still see them because you're in a concert hall. And then you're surrounded by the voices of people protesting and saying, "Hands up, don't shoot."
Wow.
So that was something I found important to do, but I also was a little afraid of reactions because people didn't come there for that, but that's what the music, that's what I wanted to do with the music. But what ended up happening is that out of that concert, and there were people in the hall that were uncomfortable. I was so busy watching and so in the moment of the piece, so I didn't look around, but my parents flew up to come and different people I knew, friends I had in the audience, they did mention some people loved it, some people were completely uncomfortable. And but what happens out of that was I was commissioned to write a piece about Sandra Bland by the Dream Unfinished, an activist orchestra. And it was for a fundraiser that was supporting different organizations that focused on Black women and police brutality. So like Black Women's Blueprint and other organizations. So it was a concert that was a fundraiser, and the whole thing was about like exactly what I wanted to do. And this time I was able to write a piece. So I collaborated with the poet Sharon Strange and the vocalist Helga Davis, and it was for the Dream Unfinished, an activist orchestra. I wrote a piece, we did a piece that was inspired by Sandra Bland. And so after doing those two pieces, there's been like a whole track of my commissioning that has been like dealing with racial violence in music. And I've been open to it because it has been something I felt a need to do. I also felt a need to balance it.
That's right.
So I've done other projects that are completely not,
Right, because I think sometimes people will push us into those things. And so before we open it up to more conversation with our audience, somebody wants to know, they thought they heard a gunshot. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. And your decision to do that, because, I think you're not there to make people comfortable. And that's what I'm talking about when you bring rec to a particular space, because if you're bringing your full self and your full voice, you can't leave it out in the hallway, right? And so we're talking about authenticity. So here you are, and you make that decision. And as a woman of a particular look, people might say, "Oh my, clutch my pearls. I didn't expect that from you. I thought you played lovely, pretty things." So,
I do give that surprise a lot in my music, because there's like my outside polite Southern
right
stuff, and then there's like the inner rage that comes out through the music.
Right. To be conscious means that you are always enraged, right? Baldwin.
Yeah. So actually the gunshot sound, what's interesting is that I kind of did it consciously and kind of subconsciously. The instrument itself was a slapstick percussion instrument, and you hold it and it's
okay.
So it's like, that's the instrument. You can actually see it. So actually visually, it's like you're seeing that. But something else that went into my research for the piece, I was listening to voices of people, but I was also listening. I had this whole thing where I was listening to sounds of violence based on police. So I would see these videos of police, and that's when I hadn't noticed this before, but I remember during 2015 seeing all the police with all the militarized police. So like seeing like the sort of vehicles they were in, and like the what they were wearing and the kind of weapons they had. So that to me was a shock during that time, because I don't know when, and someone here can say when all of that started, but I remember that image standing out to me, and I started thinking about sounds of the militarized police. And so I just actually spent a lot of time in my listening. That's why I say my listening research part of this was actually quite disturbing. And it was good that I had time. Like I had time and space, and I would walk around Princeton, and it was like I'm in a nice place to be. Well,
right.
Princeton has its own things, but
I hear you.
But so basically, I was listening to a lot of that, and I didn't consciously put where those things would be, and I didn't actually say I'll use sounds of gunshots, but I knew that I wanted a percussion instrument that had a violent sound to it.
And it's almost like you want us to hear you pause, and it is almost like a defibrillator in another sense of the word. But I appreciate that. Are there any questions? We might want to open it up for for any more questions. If not, I have a whole bunch more because I love Courtney's work and her sound. If anyone gets an opportunity, I did a film called Connecting Generations, and Courtney was very gracious at the time and gave me permission to use her work to drive that piece. And I believe that that's the reason it went so well. So I really appreciate that. You mentioned some of the artists, but who are some of the thinkers? Because you're talking about the research that is connected to visual sound. I'm hearing Baldwin, I'm hearing Du Bois, I'm hearing Perry, I'm hearing, Glaude, I'm hearing West, I'm hearing all of these people and their words kind of talking to us.
Okay, I'm glad that you're here. I mean, yeah, because I guess I don't know exactly which talks or which readings on the top of my head, but definitely like the names you mentioned, like I mentioned, it was really special to be directly around these folks, like to be around Imani Perry and Eddie Glaude. So I was like they were like, whatever talk was going on campus, I would go. And and there's some from reading, but also a lot from just being at different talks or seeing, talks online. Definitely Cornell West with different talks online. I remember just listening to a lot. And but also just even within the music world, just, I mentioned James Baldwin, of course. James Baldwin and Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou, and just different quotes that are always in my head about, like the meaning of art and music. Nina Simone, as you mentioned, Nina Simone, and especially one of her live performances of "I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free."
Yes, I love that.
So one of the live performances where she quotes Romans, I don't know if it's 12, but "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind."
Yeah.
And so that's another one. Alice Coltrane. There's so many voices that are always in my head, but I would say directly I went from the voice of Marlene Pennock from the things. I didn't play that part of the piece, but she says, "He just beat me. What did I do? What did I do to him?" And so I sat with her words a lot and just like, I don't know.
It's a lot. So you talk about balance before, and so you're doing this work, but what else are you doing? Where are you right now? What are you creating? We're still in this place. I think that Pam Morgan kind of laid out a really good overview of what we're feeling right now, and so talk about some of the things that you are currently doing. We got about 4 more minutes or so.
Okay.
3 more minutes, I think.
Oh, okay. Too many projects, but that's good. That's good right now. I just finished a piece for Orpheus Chamber Ensemble and featuring Branford Marsalis. So that piece is like a setting, my own sort of setting of themes from the opera Carmen. And so that's interesting. So that's a very different kind of piece, but at the same time, I always find something personal in every project I have. So I would have thought that commission was one of the least personal, being that it's such a popular piece. Like Bizet's Carmen is so classic, and then and it's not like I'm composing it from scratch, whatever that means, but it's I'm taking themes that people recognize, but at the same time I had to make it personal. And so what I did was I really focused on the perspective of Carmen. And there's themes from other people in the piece that happen in the orchestra, but Branford Marsalis, who I'm very excited to work with, I just want to mention that. It's very exciting. So
keep dropping the names, Doug. Drop them.
Yeah, so it's really great that someone I grew up listening to all these years that I'm working with him. So his saxophone represents Carmen, and he's the soloist, and then there's the orchestra. So other things happen, but they're all like the Crazy Joe. I think of Joe from Carmen Jones, but Don Jose in the original. Like there's like themes that happen, but it's all centered around her. And I imagine an ending where she lives at the end. So something like that. Like it's still issues that I have, in my. Well, anyway, I finished that piece, but two of the larger projects I'm doing, just to quickly say, is an opera that I'm working on called Awakening. Okay. Which is about a contemporary imagined woman who transforms out of an oppressive situation with the help of 3 spirits from the past. Harriet Tubman Sojourner Truth, and a Black Shaker Eldris named Rebecca Cox Jackson. So that's
Wow.
that's one project.
Okay,
and another
that's enough. That's enough. What we're going to do is we're going to put some things in the chat box for people who attended. We'll also email out some things. The final question was about, are you working with any lyricists, any lyrics that accompany any of the pieces? Hint, hint, you might be looking for that kind of thing, or collaborations with poets or writers.
Yeah, so I collaborated with Sharon Strange on Yet Unheard, the piece for Sandra Bland, about Sandra Bland, and along with Helga Davis. So the opera that I'm working on is with Sharon Strange again. She's writing the libretto. And Helga Davis is the vocalist and also co-collaborator, director Charlotte Brathwaite, artist Colleen Smith, dramaturg Dr. Matthew Morrison, and Sundar Ganglani. So that's a team. So I'm working with a poet on that. I've worked with writers on different projects, and I've also have several projects where I'm working with visual artists. So I mentioned Colleen Smith, but I'm working on a piece with artist Tiona McCloudon at the moment with a project through Opera Philadelphia. So we're working on that right now, a video artist, and yeah, I'm always collaborating across the arts.
That's enough. Courtney, we are indeed thrilled that you had a time set aside for us here in Newark to share your voice and to inspire us. I'm grateful representing the women at NJPAC, but as your big sister, I am so tickled and thrilled for what's happening. Thank you very much. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to give some final words, but I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to be part of our conversation. After we say our official farewells until next time, you will hear the music of Courtney Bryan with a new piece, and it will be involving the porch. So thank you very much. During this season, we know it's a difficult time. Be well. We are looking out for one another. Be safe. God bless.
Thank you so much, Antoinette and Courtney, for an inspiring discussion. We will be sending a follow-up email to everybody, including some links to the music that was shared today, the London concert, and the music that Courtney's been working on. We also will send some links to our partners and some of the work and the activities that they're up to. So please, please look for that. It'll probably go out on Monday. I hope everybody will join us for our next Women in JPAC event, which will be on Wednesday, December 2nd at 9:30 in the morning for our Leading Ladies panel. The panel is going to feature women who've been behind the creation of the New Jersey Arts and Culture Recovery Fund, which has already raised over $1 million to keep the arts alive in New Jersey during this pandemic. We'll also be celebrating our beloved outgoing president, Marsha Wilson Brown. So please don't miss that. We expect to continue our Healing Through the Arts workshops in January. So please come back. We are exploring themes around unity and reconciliation and healing as we move forward as a country. And until then, I hope you all stay safe, stay well. Wish you and your families a wonderful holiday season in this strange world. And we are going to share with you, feel free to, we're going to sort of play this by ear. We're going to play a piece by Courtney, Letters from the Porch, that that she's done around the pandemic. And we won't be able to play the whole thing, but please hang on for a little bit, and please feel free to say hello as we listen to it. So, and goodbye. So thank you for joining us for this wonderful afternoon.
Thank you to our partners again.
Pieces for you, and it's dedicated mainly to the healthcare workers who are working so hard to keep us safe. The pieces I will play for you today, the first one is a hymn called Let Us Go Into the House of the Lord. The second piece is a folk song called La Llorona, and the closing piece is an original of mine called Eternal Rest. Hope you enjoy.
better play, Courtney. You better play. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, NJ Tax team, for all that you've done to continue to support this work.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye.